I talk about how Mary and I met, I want to mention how Mary and Eloise Smith met because it's such a great story. Eloise was at a grocery store and shopping, and she saw Mary with her cart ahead of her, and she was so struck by Mary's beauty that she simply followed her around in the grocery store because she just couldn't take her eyes off of her. And this may have even happened more than once. It turned out that Mary and Paige belonged to a Christian fellowship at UCLA. There were 6 of them from the faculty. And that's how Mary and Paige met. So Paige invited Mary over for dinner, and Eloise went to the door when the doorbell rang, and here was the woman that she followed around. So I always liked that story. They were 2 remarkably beautiful women. About the first week when we moved here from Cambridge to take up teaching duties, I was invited to Maurice Nathanson's home for an evening, and I went, and there was Mary, and she sat on the other side of the room. And when we spoke, it's as if our voices arced electrically with one another. And that was the evening we fell in love. It was an elective affinity that sustained us with our friendship all the while we were here. And so it was a terrific meeting. And she admitted the same, that we just somehow knew we would be lifelong friends at the first encounter. I'm stunned to think back on the fact that she gave Chadwick a place to live when he first arrived here. I mean, he was nobody to take home. But Mary was the only person rough enough, tough enough to keep him in check. And he behaved himself with Mary because you did not fool around with Mary. Mary made him behave, which was really remarkable. And he lived in the cottage behind her home when she lived up on Empire Grade. So I was always appreciative and grateful to her for doing that. One time, Mary said, would you like to go riding with me? I have an extra horse. And I thought, it'd be one of the greatest things ever, because when I was young, I wanted to be a cowboy in the summer and a fireman in the winter. So we went riding, and while we were riding, she said, why don't you get a horse? And I almost fell off the horse thinking, I could have a horse? Yeah. She said, I'll find you one. So she found me a proud cut quarter horse that was just 2 years old and was just a fabulous animal. And so I had a horse. It's one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. She also got me a handmade saddle from a famous saddle maker in Oregon. And I had a horse. And we started a horse project on the campus here. A couple other students had horses. And it was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life to have had this horse. I named him Xanthus. His name was Charlie, which I thought was kind of, mundane. But I renamed him Xanthus, X-A-N-T-H-O-S, because he was the horse of Achilles in the Iliad, who prophesied Achilles' death. So I thought that would be a good name for a philosopher's horse. So I owe that to Mary. It was so characteristic of her to say that when she'd see Charlene and me, that she needed a Charlene and Paul fix. Meaning, we had to come over and see her, she had to come over and see us. It's so inimitably Mary to have her talk about our relationship and her enjoying our company by calling it a fix, as if we were a drug to her addiction. And I thought that was terrific. I want to say something about Mary's lecturing. I went to hear her give her signature piece, I'm sure it was. She couldn't have outdone it. And it was on the 12th century Madonna in 12th century paintings. And it was in the Cowell dining hall, and it was packed. And I watched how people strained every nerve to hear her every word, even to the issue of an arched neck. And I was so stunned at the impact she had on the audience. and how perfect the performance was. There wasn't a word out of place. There wasn't any kind of, you know, and it reminded me of a piece of German lieder. It was just so formed and framed as only she could do it. And I never got over how this was one of the greatest lectures I'd ever heard and one of the greatest academic performances. I'd like to say something about her artwork, but in a way it's beyond me to really try to express what she did with her paintings. It had something to do with the eternal feminine, the way she painted goddesses and so on. Jim's poem, in a way, expresses that wonderfully. And we always appreciated what she did. I loved especially the Sukkot booth that she made, which I think is here, isn't it?
It's in the exhibit.
Yeah, I mean, that was wonderful. I took photographs of each panel and each area and photographed beautifully. So there's one poem by Wallace Stevens, one of my favorite poets, one of the greatest poets of American poetry. It's called The Idea of Order in Key West. And the opening line is, "She sang beyond the genius of the sea." And to me, that I always think of Mary when I read this poem, and it's all about watching a woman walking along the seashore. And I would have loved to have read it to you, but it's too long. She was the maker of the song she sang. She measured to the hour its solitude, and so on. Wonderful lines, and they capture in some way my love of Mary. Thank you.